Hello, Horror Hounds. I've got a bit of time on my hands, so I figured it was time for another episode of Freddy's Nightmares. We are at Season 2, Episode 8, and an episode called Bloodlines.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Wow, surprisingly, that was a pretty strong episode. Just peripheral ties to the whole Nightmare on Elm Street mythos, but that's fine when you've got a strong story. The script writers this time decided to turn the format of the show, which for so many episodes has been a hindrance, into an actual strength. The Bloodlines hints maybe at the generational aspect of the story, but rather than necessarily having an A story and a B story, instead we get a family story with a time jump in the middle. So the B story is quite some number of years later. And you know what? It kind of works. It works a hell of a lot better than some of the hokey nonsense that I've sat through in previous episodes. So, the first part, the A story, the first half of this story takes place in, quote, Springwood some while ago. And we know it's some time ago because the first thing we hear is a news report on the radio that says, in local news, a grand jury decided today that no indictments would be handed out in the fiery death of Freddy Krueger. Springwood should rest easier tonight. That's the last we'll hear about this guy. So, the first part of the story is firmly set in Springwood's past. Some months perhaps, I don't know how quickly the wheels of justice turn, some months perhaps after human Freddy was burnt to death. And it involves a mother and son who's... The next item on the radio is the escape of a prisoner who was a Springwood local. He got sent to prison for armed robbery, and the money was never recovered. So there's a police guard outside the family house. The police believe he'll come back for some reason. The son, there's clearly beef, doesn't want him to come back. And the mum is all sort of away with the fairies. Oh, Woody's coming back, Woody's coming back. We can finally take that holiday to the Grand Canyon. And through a few flashbacks, we learn that family life wasn't the greatest. He was an abusive father. Clearly he was a violent armed robber as well. The reason Mum is away with the fairies is because he used to slap her around, and one time hit her and she fell down the stairs and hit her head. Has never been right since. The son gets a gun out and wants to kill him. Dad does turn up because the money's hidden in the house, and that portion of the story plays out. There's one dream sequence in it. Not much hay is made of it. But that's fine because this sort of focused family drama and where's the money and what will Dad do to get the money was enough to keep my interest. Then, B story, rather than moving on to a side character from the A story and trying to tell a whole brand new story, now the son has grown a bit more, married, and it's clear very early on in this segment that they want kids, can't conceive, and because of his dad's criminal past and his juvie criminal record, he can't adopt. So they buy a child on the black market. Mum is at home to stay from their care home as well, so Mum off with the fairies is in with the mix. We see a short scene where the baby comes home, and then we skip forward another 6 years, and Maggie, we'll call her adoptive mum, although there was no adoption, it was a straight out purchase, is starting to have concerns about the daughter. She thinks something's not right. She's starting to have nightmares, and she is desperate to know who her daughter's biological parents were. A nice touch, now that we've skipped forward in time, is on the radio now. There's a news report of yet another college student who has died in their sleep, and yet another mortuary, the third opening in Springwood. So the mortuary business is really booming in Springwood. So even though there's no real Freddy influence, it's there on the edges. These writers are concerned with fitting this story into the Nightmare on Elm Street myth and Springwood as we know it. The theme of abusive parents and cycles of violence and the like plays nicely into the Freddy mythos anyway. There's a fantastically downplayed nightmare sequence that owes a lot to the bunny boiling scene in Fatal Attraction, because Mum is starting to have more and more graver doubts about their adoptive daughter, Patty, and where she came from and who her parents were. That only escalates. There's a second nightmare sequence that is a really protracted, really unexpected homage to The Omen. There's a Rottweiler. There's a jackal's skeleton corpse in a human grave. I mean, full on Omen homage, which I wasn't expecting. Really enjoyed. And what can I say? This is kind of how you do it right. We've got a couple of script writers here who have managed to turn the format into a strength and make it work for them, and weave in enough sort of background Freddy notes to make it feel like, yeah, this is happening in Springwood, and this is happening in a Springwood that is going to the dogs because Freddy's malign influence is spreading. Spoiler alert as to the progeny of Patty. Her mother was a nurse at the Springwood Sanatorium for the Criminally Insane, and her father was an inmate there. So the same sort of conception story, a similar sort of conception story for Freddy as well. So all in all, with very little whiz-bang in this episode, just a focus on characters and events, this has actually turned out to be one of the stronger episodes, with some real nice insider nods to the history of Freddy and what is happening sort of outside this episode in wider Springwood. So, thumbs up for Bloodlines.